I'm Kevin from Bake Boss, and a few of you have asked me to demo how I make or prep my cake boards for a 3D cake. I'm going to be using some 8mm all thread. I'm going to be using a MDF cake board. Now these boards I get from the art shop because they're pre-cut. Now if anybody's ever tried to use a jigsaw on a piece of MDF, quite often you can get something that looks quite fluted and chunky, and when you go back in with a sander to try and sand it out, you can easily waste a good hour trying to create a perfect round board and not achieve it. So this was approximately $14 from the art shop. I've certainly made up that money by not having to spend the time cutting it out. So cake board. I've got 8mm washers and nuts to go on my all thread. Now one thing I use as well on these boards, because I need to make it quite quickly. If you've got the time, that's fine, you're going to save some money, but I don't have the time because I'm knocking these out all the time. I've got little door stops here, which I screw onto the bottom of my board so that when I turn it upside down, it raises the board off the table. It means that my all thread or any screws that are in the bottom of my board aren't going to scratch somebody's table. That's the last thing you want to do, is send out a cake and it actually damage their house. And it also means that it's risen it up off the table so that I can actually reach underneath it and pick up a 10-kilo cake if I have to. It's quite difficult if your cake's sitting flush on the bench top. You sort of have to slide it off and pick it up from the side. This way, it's nice and proud. I'm going to throw in some photos of other boards that they sell at the art shops. They've got quite high profiles on the side of them. So high profile boards, they look a little bit heavier, so they look a little bit more expensive. So if you want to add the look of value to your cake as well, you can use the ones that have got the high profile. And I'll flick a photo onto this tutorial with that as well. I've got some foil and I've got some adhesive spray. Now this is how I fix my foil to my boards. I'm going to use a Boss blade wrapped in a handy towel just to expel all the air bubbles. I've got some food grade vinyl hose which I'm going to wrap around my all thread. Now that's going to keep everything food grade and nice and safe. And I've got some double-sided sellotape which I'm going to edge my board with, and we can go in with some ribbon later on, colour of your choice, just to theme your cake board up as well. And obviously I've got a drill with an 8mm in diameter drill bit. The rest of the tutorial is going to be in close-up, so bear with me and I hope you enjoy it. Cheers. Okay, so here we have our board. I've just turned it upside down so the stickers are on the bottom. If I try and put my paper on the top, that sticker line's going to come out, and if I try and pull it off, I'm just going to make a mess of it. I've got my 4 little door stops here. I'm just going to position them relatively evenly around the outside. It doesn't matter, it just needs to be stable, so obviously that's not okay. So just position them evenly around the outside. Make sure that your screw that's coming out the bottom isn't going to go all the way through and come out at the top of your cake board. I'm just going to set that on there like that now. And with a screwdriver, just gently work at it, wait for it to bite. I don't need a drill, it's just happy to do that. So I'm going to go around and do all 4. Great, so 4 door stops on my board, really solid, and now there's a gap underneath so I can reach underneath my cake board. What you can do at this stage if you wanted to is you could take a set of these Bud lights that we sell at Bake Boss and just put a blue tack on the back there. I'm just going to stick that to the underside of the board and wrap the Bud lights around those door stops. Now the reason why I don't hot glue it to the bottom is if it runs out of, the batteries run out and I need to change it in situ, I can just slide that battery pack out at the party and change the batteries out. Just going to gently wrap that around, secure it in place. It's wire. And when I turn that on, it's going to add a glow between the table and the bottom of the cake board. So if you're not happy with that little gap that's sitting underneath the bottom of your cake board, it's a great way to turn it into a feature. Okay, so I've just marked roughly the centre of my cake board. If it was going to be a minion cake, I'd want to have 2 holes, 1 for each leg. But this is just a basic example to show you a cake board with a central support and some cake boards attached to it with all thread. These are the Bake Boss Masonite boards, so they're made out of wood as well. And if you have a look, just take a pencil and run it around the back of it, you will actually be able to find the central point because they're obviously cut with a central point in the circle. I'm just going to take the plastic off, and now I've already got my drill mark. One here, and then here's the other one. There you go. Certainly takes all the guesswork out of it. I'm just going to take my drill now with my 8mm drill bit and drill each one of these holes. I'm going to take it outside so I don't have any wood chips or anything inside my kitchen. The next thing I'm going to do before I do anything else is cover my board, or my base board, with a food grade cake foil. And I do that by using a adhesive spray, my foil, a scraper. In this case I'm using a Boss blade because they're really strong, rigid, and I can get it right behind the air bubbles and push them all out. But because that could cut my foil or tear my foil, I'm just going to wrap it in a kitchen towel just to soften that edge, so when I push the air bubbles out, the edge of my scraper doesn't catch the foil and tear it. So I'm just going to do that now in front of you. I'm going to put down some paper first so I don't get this adhesive spray all over my bench top. Now I've got my board back upside down again, and I'm just going to put my double-sided tape on. It's a lot easier to put the double-sided tape on straight at this stage than it is later on. So I've turned my board upside down and I'm just going to put my tape on. And I do it this way so that the tape is always flush with the top of the board. Otherwise you get a little bit sitting proud, and one of my pet hates is having ribbon sitting higher than your cake board. You want it to look nice and flush. At least by hanging below the cake board, you're not going to see that discrepancy. Okay, so the next bit's quite simple. I'm going to put my all thread through the hole, secure it underneath with 2 nuts, one to lock the other one in place, because out of all of the nuts that you don't want to come loose, it's that bottom one. So 1 nut to hold it in place, another nut to hold it behind there to lock it in place, and a washer also. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to thread one of the nuts onto here, and then put a washer on it. Now the reason why I do that is if I put the nuts in from underneath, I'm going to have to go all the way to the other end of my all thread. In this case it's 1 metre long, and thread the nut all the way on. So don't make that mistake. We're not always going to use the all thread this long. You can use a hacksaw and just cut it to whatever length you want. I'm just going to take those nuts off now. And just poke it through. Now, one thing we don't want is we don't want that sitting any prouder than our door stops. So I'm just going to pull it out a little bit. There you go. And adjust the nut on the other side. There you go, perfect. Just going to slip a washer on there. I'm going to put 1 nut on there to hold it, and another nut on it to lock that nut in place. So 2 nuts, 1 behind each other, nice and strong. Now this is still quite loose. I can go in with my crescent spanner now. I don't have to hold the other side because the other nut is holding it in place, and I can tighten it nice and tight. Now how was that? This isn't going to go anywhere. Okay, so mounting your boards onto the vertical rod, all you do is you put a nut on your all thread, slide a washer onto it, slide your cake board onto it, slide another washer on top, and then slide your nut on. Once your nut's in place, you can just tighten that with a crescent spanner and it's good to go. You can do any combination of horizontal boards and vertical rods that you like using this system. Okay, so you've probably seen me do this before. I'm just going to take this vinyl hose, I'm going to cut it to the length that I need, and I'm going to take a sharp knife or a scalpel, and I'm just going to cut it around so that it opens up. You see what I've done there? I'm then able to just thread it straight onto my all thread. Just like that. and by its very nature, it just wants to bite into that all thread, and that is how I cover my all thread and make it food grade. I've got my LED lights there to make it pop at the party. I've got my ribbon, which is sitting below the cake board, and if it was sitting above it, it would look a little bit messy. I've got my foil covered MDF at the bottom there to keep it all food grade. I've got my boards, my Masonite boards from Bake Boss. I've drilled those out, and I've got my nuts and my washers holding them firmly in place. I've got my double nut on the bottom to keep that locked in place so it doesn't come loose. I've got my vinyl hose wrapped around the all thread to isolate that away from my cake as well and keep it all food safe. I'm going to get some small pieces of the cake foil, put a little hole in it, and just wrap it around the nuts, top and bottom, to isolate those from my cake as well. If this was going to be a horse, obviously you'd have 4 legs, which means it's going to have 4 smaller pieces of all thread, 4 holes locking it all in place. And this board may be an oval sitting on top, so you can build your body of your horse around it. And it may have another piece of all thread just here, sticking on an angle, with another cake board that you can build the head around. So, like I said, this is basic. It's 1 center support, and that's how I put it together. So I hope that helps. Cheers.